Hey there, it's Kate Swoboda, also known as Kate Courageous. I'm the creator of YourCourageousLife.com, the director of the Courageous Living Coach certification at TeamCLCC.com, and author of the book, The Courage Habit. In my continuing quest as a multi-potentialite, I also talk about teaching the teachers over at Facilitate with Impact. And now I'm the host of a new podcast, the Your Courageous Life podcast. We're going to talk about going after what you want and living a more courageous, emotionally resilient life. I might drop a couple of F-bombs, so don't listen with your kids in the back seat. And here we go. Hey there. I have so much that I want to say for today's episode, which will be all about becoming more resilient. I wanted to give a quick shout out to a couple of people who have left iTunes reviews. I so appreciate it. If you have a moment to go over to Your Courageous Life in iTunes, leave a review. Nikki Orser, thank you. Christy Michelle Forsman, thank you. Just, I love and appreciate the time, because sometimes when you do these introverted things like create a podcast from the privacy of your home office, you wonder who actually listens. And it's just great to hear that some people are out there listening and enjoying, and I just so appreciate it when people take the time. Especially at a time like this, times like these, when resilience feels really tough. So I wanted to talk today about becoming more resilient. My original title for today's podcast was going to be What to Do When the World Breaks Your Heart. And I'm going to kind of sort of try not to cry. There's a way in which I don't want to cry in talking about any of this, because I just want to, get the ideas out. And then there's a way in which if tears come, I feel like, okay, this is real and this is true. As a mother, I think as a human being, I don't think it's just a mom thing, but as a mother, there was a couple things have been converging recently for me around social media and all the things going on in the political landscape. And I've been saying for quite some time this phrase, the resistance needs your resilience. The resistance needs your resilience. And a couple things just really backed up on me recently. And I think the thing that really pushed it over the edge, well, two things really. One is hearing about children being separated from their parents. And whether you believe that someone has a right to seek asylum, whether you believe that border crossings are illegal and should be punishable in X, Y, and Z way, it is a choice to decide that while people are being detained, that they would be separated from their children. To find out that very, very young children even are being pulled from their parents, babies. And you just know that there's no way that in a detention facility, tiny little babies are getting held and rocked and fed as much as I know a baby needs to be held and cuddled and cared for. And here come the tears. Whatever your beliefs are about, I'm reading articles about parents who they are getting deported because they're illegally crossing the border, but they're getting deported without their children. Their children, for some reason, are not being deported with them. And I think about, for as many problems as I see happening in our country, I think about how bad it would have to be for me to leave everything that I know with only what I can carry and my children, and risk so much. I just, yeah. So, okay, deep breath. It's been tugging at my heart. It's been so difficult. It's hitting me in a way that a lot of other things that I've disagreed with have not hit in quite such a hard way. But then the other thing that has really started to get to me has been seeing how I believe, coming from a place of deep fear about where things are headed, seeing people who theoretically have the same end goal for how our country can be better, for how we want to see things change, seeing people behave in really abusive ways to one another. And I'm calling it abusive because when there's name calling, when there's shouting down, when there's a lack of even willingness to see, I disagree with you and I'm looking at your point of view. It just it's just one too many times where I've just seen a pile on, and I'm looking at this on social media and I'm going, we all want the same thing. We all want more rights for people who don't have them. We all want more love. We all want more prosperity for everyone. We all want these things. How can we stay focused on that and not make one another into enemies? And I had a situation in my own Facebook experience where I was trying to get help for a friend of mine who is a teacher and who is gay, and she was outed by her students and then relentlessly harassed by them, and went to her administration to try to get support, and they were not giving her support. And she felt really alone. And so I posted onto my Facebook wall about, hey, I know someone in this district needs support. Is there anyone else who lives in this district? Any other teachers I might know in this district? And suddenly someone's coming on talking about how, sort of like a wet blanket, what's the point? Nobody cares, nobody listens. And this is somebody I know who wants the same changes that I want. And I said to this person, we're really trying to just get support right now. We're trying to focus on the solutions. I hear you. And suddenly this is turned on to me, and I just don't want to see the truth of how bad things are. I'm just part of the problem as well, because and it just became this whole thing where I just wanted to scream at the computer, like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I'm just trying to get support for this person who is suffering. I'm not turning a blind eye to the larger problems our world faces around this issue. I'm not, right? I know I'm not alone in feeling this way. And something just really hit for me after that experience where I just felt like, and I haven't felt this way before. I just felt like I'm done. I just want off social media. I don't want to be around anyone. And that is just not a place I've gone to. And so since it was a place I went to this time, I went, okay, I know that that's not the answer. I know that for as many things as are negative about the online space, there are also benefits, and I don't want to be one-sided about it. So let me see how I can actually, really get clear and in integrity about my own behavior, take some of my own medicine that I would encourage for any client of mine who felt like she was overwhelmed and was about to give up on trying to affect change, whether in her life or elsewhere. How do I become more resilient? That was the question that was on my mind, and that's the question that I'm going to explore in today's podcast episode. Living with courage is something that I've been talking about for ages. I often have talked about it from the perspective of going after your big dreams. And I still think that even amid all the things going on in the world, your big dreams are still valuable. I think that becoming more joyful is an incredibly courageous act. And I think that staying connected to the things that lift you up, that make you feel more joy, is something that's very necessary in these times, even amid all the suffering that we see happening. There are a couple things that I try to remember as well to keep this all in perspective. We live in really troubling times, but it's not as though the troubles are new. It's not as though we weren't living in troubling times in the 80s before everybody was on the internet. It's actually, I believe, that we are seeing so much more of it and it's coming at us faster than ever. And because it's coming at us faster than ever, at a time the news of people suffering is coming at us faster than ever, and because we live in a time where this change, this onslaught of information is coming so fast, it's a relatively new change. It's not something we're accustomed to. It's not something we've been used to. It's not something we've always known. Because of that, it means that we need some new strategies for adapting. And the way that I'm trying to look at all of this is as a call to be sort of like a courage warrior, a call to ask ourselves who we want to be amid all of this, a call to find our purpose in the midst of this. Because if you want a better world, and I believe you do, it's going to require becoming more resilient. And I'm going to talk about how we can do that. I think becoming more resilient starts on a personal level. You can't draw water from an empty well. You can't give what you don't have to give. And I think that when we try to overgive and we don't have our own internal reserves of compassion or of efficacy or of feeling like we have capacity to hold space for other people's pain or to do something or to take action, when we try to give from that place, what ends up happening is that we become really worn down, really brittle, really weakened. We need fortification. And so when I think about becoming more resilient, I think we need ways of fortifying ourselves that start with our own internal reserves. And for me, where my money's at, this is what I call process work. Now, when I talk about process work with people think often the first time that I talk about it that it sounds crazy. I think of process work as being just like having a meditation practice. You hear about these people who have these 20-minute meditation practices. They sit down, they maybe light a candle, maybe they have a mantra, maybe they just breathe. But they sit down and they breathe and they don't necessarily try to get rid of thoughts, but they simply go, all right, let me focus on the breath. And then, of course, the thoughts come in, and you take a breath, and you just try to come back to the present moment. And then thoughts come in, and then you take a breath, and you try to come back to the present moment. And then thoughts come in, and you see how this goes. And what people who engage with some kind of presence-based practice, some kind of accessing the body on a regular basis, what they report is that they are more mindful in their lives, that they are sleeping better, feeling better in general, that they have more focus. Really, they report that they are more resilient around stress. With process work, what I'm describing, or about to describe, I think it's a similar kind of a thing, only it's a venting of excess emotion. When I look at the news headlines and I, as an empathic human being, I have this post on my website. You should look it up if you want a little rallying cry. It's called "You Are Not Too Fucking Sensitive." And it's for all those people in the world who have been told that they're too sensitive. So I'm like, you are not too fucking sensitive. And I think that as an empathic human being, if you are even remotely paying attention to everything going on in the world right now, you are feeling all the things. You're feeling heartbroken, you're feeling angry, you're feeling enraged, you're feeling anxious, you're feeling uncertain, you're feeling all these things. And if there's this, I like to think of like a metaphorical emotional balloon that's just getting full and full and full and full. Well, what happens to a balloon that gets too full? It does one of two things. It'll either leak air or it'll explode. And I see a lot of people engaging with one another right now with very full emotional balloons, and they are going onto social media and they are leaking air. That's usually passive aggressive, sarcastic, wet blanket kinds of comments, or they are exploding. Anger is a really healthy emotion. I'm not saying that the anger is a sign of them doing it wrong or you're wrong if you're angry. But venting anger out onto people, especially when those people actually want the same things as you, they just might have different ideas about how to go about it, or they might not be as evolved in their thinking as you are, but they would be if they had enough room to integrate what you're trying to explain to them instead of getting this onslaught of fury. That's not helpful. That's not building what we're trying to build. It doesn't build their ability to join with you in your idea, and it doesn't build your own resilience to vent your anger out onto other people. So I really, and this is, man, do I have some karma coming to me. I am not at all sitting here preaching to people about this from a place of always having been calm and compassionate. I have done some social media dumping that I wish I could go back and erase. I have unleashed my fury. I have been abusive. I have name called. And I've done all of that because I've been so fucking afraid. And my own emotional balloon has been so full. And I take it upon myself to go, okay, I want to be more resilient. I want to really be in this for the long haul rather than burning myself out on this parasitic anger and fury. Then at least for me, living my courageous life, what I've got to do is I've got to become more resilient, and that means I've got to take a really real look at my own integrity. And integrity is when your words and actions match, and they are in alignment with your values, beliefs, commitments, and life vision. I got that definition from my coach, Matthew Marzell. Integrity is when your words and actions match, and they are in alignment with your values, beliefs, commitments, and life vision. So it's not just are your words and actions matching. It's are your words and actions matching and in alignment with all those other things, because it is not alignment. It is not integrity, at least for me. And I don't think for a hell of a lot of other people, to say, I want the world to change. Those are my words. I'm going to go out there and make it change. Those are my actions. And then have a value around treating other people with a baseline of respect and then going out there and just dumping on them. Doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It's not in integrity for us, for ourselves. It's not in integrity for the change that we want to see. So how do we vent that emotional balloon? Well, process work, I mentioned earlier, I think is a practice that's really similar to meditation. You find 20 minutes. You sit down somewhere private, ideally somewhere private. You think of the things that are just enraging you, and you scream it out into a towel. I know, it sounds crazy, right? You scream it out into a towel. Or you punch pillows. You do something to get the anger out. You go for a run, and as childish as it might sound to do this, you pretend that every single step you're taking is you're stomping on the issue that is just driving you crazy, or the person who is the figurehead of the administration of the issue. A lot of deep breaths. And what I often find to be the more important work with process work is actually getting into the vulnerability, the broken-hearted, sad despair. That's what I spend most of my process work time doing. Sometimes I go with anger, but more often than not, what I sit down and I do is I sit down and I think of the people who are suffering, and I allow that empathy and that sadness to rise up within me, and I cry. And there's a timer, and it's 20 minutes, just like you'd set a timer for meditation. I cry it out. I have a box of tissues. I let my despair out. I vent the emotional balloon. And I do that so that these emotions aren't pent up inside of me. It feels like crap in the middle of it. It feels like sadness. It's harder when you first start because you got a backlog of it. You know, it's kind of like if you've been keeping trash inside of your house instead of hauling it out to the curb to be taken away each week, you're going to have a lot of trash built up in your house. And each time you sit down to process it out, that's hauling one bag at a time out to the curb. So at first, it's a lot more intense, but with time, it becomes less intense. With time, what you start to notice is that you finish a 20-minute session of processing out emotion, and it's like, okay, I can tap into my joy again, which is important. I can tap into clear thinking, which is really important. I can tap into a sense of capacity, because how often does our sadness and our anger and our anxiety leave us feeling like it's really real, that there is just nothing we can do and we have no capacity to do anything. This process, as crazy as it sounds, is the closest thing to sane that I know in an age where everything is coming at us way too fast. This is a way of trying to vent my own emotional balloon, to have a really real, authentic connection to these emotions, to not pathologize them, to not make them wrong, but to also not do damage with them. Because if I do damage with them, then I'm contributing to the problem. If I take my venting onto someone else, and it just doesn't do anything good. I wish it did. I wish, because we're all doing it, right? I wish it did do something good. I wish I had seen evidence that it did something good, because we're all doing it. So then maybe we'd get somewhere. I'm interested in us really creating a different world. And I think it starts with us doing our own work. Now, am I sitting over here saying, just live in the light? Just live in the light, meditate, think positive, it'll all get better? No, of course not. I would hope that anybody who's actually taken some time to really go through my website, or really listen to other episodes of this podcast, or even really just think about the definition of integrity that I've given, would be able to glean that, of course, I'm not just saying, rub a couple crystals together and hope for the best. We need boots on the ground. We need calls to representatives. We need donations to causes. We need helping the helpers. My point in this podcast episode is that we do not become more resilient without doing our own work. We do not become more resilient, and the resistance needs our resilience. We do not become more resilient if we dissolve ourselves, if we get so exhausted by all the anger and the heartache and the anxiety that then we can't function. There is a psychological undertow to the energy that goes along with those emotions that no human being can outswim, since we're using the undertow as a metaphor here. There's no way. You have to actually deal with the negative emotions if you want to continue to do the swim. You have to fortify yourself and become stronger in order to do what you're hoping to do in the world. So now I'd like to talk a little bit about literally what you can do, because I know that it's not just enough to go do some crying, go do some anger, the world is good. And by the way, I didn't mention a couple moments ago when I was talking about my own practice with this, I actually have playlists on my computer of, like, you know those songs, right? The ones that always make you cry. Sia, Breathe Me, that's one for me. I have a playlist of songs that always make me cry. I have that queued up. I have a playlist of songs that are just this, like, really intense kind of energy, good for doing some screaming into a towel. I have those kinds of songs, and I think playlists are a great way to enter into that work. But, like, here's the picture to have in mind. Literally, this is my life. I got a lot of things I want to do in this world. I want to be a force for good. I want to, love my kid with everything I've got in me. I want to love my husband with everything I've got in me. I want to run my business. I want to connect with friends. I want to have joy. I want to stand up for other people. All these things, right? And I think you're probably the same way if you're listening to this. You have all the things you're trying to do and wanting to do. So what it would look like is you make that time to sit down and cry it out or scream it out. Sometimes just like shaking your body if you feel really anxious is really helpful. And then you end that process with a little bit of time to just breathe. Sometimes I'll end that process with like dancing to happy music, or what I call a laugh session, where I literally just like start laughing intentionally, kind of a fake it till you make it thing. That sets a container for the experience. And then I get up and I go, what is it I need to do right now? Do I need to make a call to my representatives? Okay, and what is it I want to say when I make that call? And how am I going to speak in a way that is totally honest and straightforward, firm, not placating, but not speaking to them in a way that I wouldn't want to be spoken to? Or how can I be visible in my support? I see people, and this is one of the things that has gone on my list of things that drives me crazy. See these people, they're like, internet activism doesn't do anything. What's the point? Like all these people, they think they're doing something. It's just internet activism. Let me tell you something. Internet activism might not be equivalent on the action scale of going out and banging on the door of some company that's doing some horrible thing to other people. But maybe it is. First of all, maybe there are some people who are differently abled than you who don't have the capacity to drop everything and physically go to a location. I mean, there's this whole thing I have about dumping on people, critiquing them for what they're trying to do, rather than supporting them for what they're trying to do. People have their reasons for doing what they're capable of doing and feeling like this is what I'm able to do. And the invitation to do more is always going to get more people doing more than you didn't do enough. Here's why. But internet activism is, in fact, powerful. It's powerful in a couple of different ways. First of all, internet activism is part of what has fueled the Me Too movement. All these companies that have fallen away from supporting the NRA is because of internet activism, because of millions, thousands, millions, I don't know how many people speaking out, retweeting, sharing, saying we need to do something different. These companies that have propped up unsavory individuals or organizations, they don't want to be associated with that kind of outcry. So internet activism does do something. But beyond that, I would argue that internet activism does something for the people who traditionally feel unseen. I don't like to go around displaying my own personal social justice credentials. I find that, at least for me, I don't think that everybody has to feel the way I do, but at least for me, going around talking about all the things I do to, or all the appreciation I've gotten for the things that I do somehow demeans it. But for the purpose of making this point, I will simply share that I have had people reach out to me who belong to some of the groups that are being oppressed, that are being ignored, that are having their rights trampled on. And they have said, thank you for sharing that. It makes me feel seen. It makes me feel supported. So I think that there's a very real effect that might not necessarily immediately translate to anyone changing some kind of law that they're trying to pass, or I get it, right? Like the metric we all want is something where the institutions that we have set up are supporting the people in ways that are really humane. We might not necessarily see that, but it is really important, I think, to make sure that people who might right now be in hiding or feel like they have to be in hiding for who they are able to go, okay, like I'm seen. This person sees that this or that policy or person or organization causes me suffering, and they are willing to speak up and out about it. That matters. And think about it. Wouldn't it matter to you if it was you? Other things you can do. Obviously, boycott the products or the organizations that contribute to suffering. Do call your representatives. Make sure you know those numbers and who you're supposed to contact about what issue. Pay attention to these things. Donate to causes. Speak up and out. But another thing that I think can be really helpful too is helping the helpers. Is there anyone you know who is a social worker, who is an organizer, who is someone who is trying to do the work of organizing behind the scenes to get all the boots on the ground, to get out the vote, to get out the help, to get out the support? And if so, how can you help them so that they continue to feel more resilient? This is something that I'm actually integrating into my coach training program in future years of the program, partnering with organizations that provide social services and saying, do any of your people who are working for the social service agency need any coaching? Do they need someone who is going to take a half an hour or an hour to hold space for them? Do they need someone who is going to take the time to validate what they're feeling? I think we need this. I think we need more paraprofessional support. Do you know a teacher in a classroom right now who could use support? Who do you know who needs support, and how can we help the helpers? Maybe you can't actually be the one who goes to the place where the conflict is happening or works for the agency that is trying to change the policy. But how can you support the people who are in those trenches? That's something that I think we all need to give a lot more thought to, because if I'm thinking about how I personally can become more resilient, I know that this is not something that I can do alone. That when we reach out and we create community, we become more resilient and we become more courageous. And in becoming more resilient, we need to fortify the people who help us. We got to tap in and tag out sometimes. Some of us are going to have to tag out and just be like, I need a break. Somebody else has got to be at the helm. How do we support them? That's the question I put to you. Who could you support in your community who is doing some kind of work to create positive change? How can you support them in some way, emotional, financial, or otherwise? Here's the last thing I'm going to say. I don't think that I'm doing any of this perfectly. I'm actually not putting this podcast episode out because I think that I've got it figured out, and here I am, and I'm going to tell you how. I actually think that the last thing the world needs right now is another white person trying to tell everyone how they're supposed to do activism. That's not my purpose in this episode. My purpose in this episode is to speak about how you can become more resilient, which then enables you to find the people that you want to align with, or the people who are doing this work on a regular basis, who you want to support financially, emotionally, or otherwise. That's the purpose of this episode, to really remind all of us that it's not all hopeless, but that when our fear takes over, it feels like it is all hopeless. In terms of resources for you to educate yourself more, one of the people that I look to most often actually is Desiree Adaway. I would encourage you to check out what she's up to. Desiree is spelled Desiree. Adaway is spelled Adaway. I have really appreciated the way that she has presented questions that cause me to think, that cause me to go, oh, whoa, I don't have an easy answer for that. And that's probably because of my privilege. What I'm trying to get people to do in this episode is go, How do I do the work so that I actually feel like I have the energy and the capability to go, what needs to be done? And how do I educate myself about the issues at hand? And how do I become more involved? And how do I get more engaged? That's my purpose in this episode. I am not the person you should be looking to for the ultimate answers about these things. I am someone who's saying that I think that we can do better than getting so stuck in our fear that we feel like we're not able to do anything. I'm also a person who's saying that, man, I get how that feels. I am right along beside you in going, it all feels like too much sometimes. And I'm still saying that the resistance needs our resilience, that there is something that we can do about it to make the world better, even when we feel like our emotional balloons are way too full. And I'm saying, I hope that you will utilize some of the lessons and tools that I'm talking about in this episode to make that possible for yourself. Because whatever you do to make yourself more resilient, to stand up for what is right, is going to have a ripple effect for someone else's life. It is not just all about you and selfishness and, oh, you need to feel better. It is about, how do you do this work? And then you feel like, yeah, game on. Who do I need to call? Where do I need to show up? What do I need to say to really be straightforward and clear in saying that this will not, that just no. I'm saying no. I'm saying, and I'm standing in my sovereignty, no to the world operating like this. That to me is the ultimate expression of living your courageous life, when who you are on the inside is so sovereign and so powerful that you're willing to say, it's not just me, I'm also creating a more courageous life for everyone else around me. I hope that this has been really helpful. Again, I'm not even remotely saying that I have all the answers. I don't. And I'm going to stumble, and I'm going to be doing this work, and I'm going to find these places where my privilege gets in the way of me seeing clearly, and I'm going to probably get stuck in despair again and feel like, ugh, fuck the internet, I can't do it. And I'm trying to make it my work with everything that I've got in me to never, ever, ever give up. Because people's lives are depending on all of us to never, ever, ever give up. That's what I have to say for today. if you have any questions that you would love for me to offer an answer to or some thoughts on in an upcoming podcast, please do reach out to me, because I would love to answer your questions and give you a little riff on courage as it applies to a whole host of topics. All right, thanks so much for being here, and here's to you living your vibrant, lovely, and courageous life. Definitely a lot less scar tissue with my husband, probably a lot faster progress in my business at various points. I mean, oh my goodness. The benefits of that consciousness and asking myself, hey, hold on, before you say that, before you do that, before you hit press send, are you going to be proud of yourself? Big question to ask. So here we are. All right. Lots of stuff to think about around what does it really take to change? I would love to hear your thoughts on any of this. If you want to head over to the private Facebook Courage Habit group, that's mostly how I'm talking with people these days about this stuff. I would so appreciate it if you'd write a little iTunes review. Helps more people to see the podcast, and I'm kind of wanting some of these ideas about making a better world and better lives to get out there, and the 5 minutes that you take to put a little podcast hello out there can help that to happen. Thanks for sticking in for this extra long episode of the Your Courageous Life podcast, and can't wait to talk to you next time.